So I brought up your website as well.
Which one?
That one.
Oh, milk. Okay.
So we will pull that up. Now I just have to. I watched the show myself on LinkedIn as well, so I can see how many people we have in. All right. So how's Texas today?
The heat is coming on. So today will be a cool day, probably high 80s, but we're going to be in the mid to high 90s for the next 10 days.
I love it. Are you a Texas native?
I was born in Boston, raised in San Francisco, and I raised my kids in San Diego and Orange County.
Oh wow, that's crisscrossing the country.
Mom was from Boston, dad was from San Francisco, so
Got it. How'd you end up in Texas?
a company Hyphen Solutions, technology company.
Yeah.
When I left Toll Brothers, they recruited me to go run the custom home building division, and then
Okay.
12 months later they decided, nah, never mind, we don't want to do that. So I was about ready to head back to Southern California, but we had made a lot of friends here. We were in no hurry, and the folks here are just so darn nice. I mean, they're polite. They have good manners. Nobody ever honks their horn at you, and they're just really, really nice people. So we just fell in love with Texas and decided to make it home.
That seems to be what a lot of people are doing, especially the Californians, right?
1,000 people per day for the past 12 years have been moving to Texas.
I saw John Burns talk once, and by the way, I love his commentary. It's fantastic. And
Yeah, John's great.
one of the things he looks at is U-Haul rates,
Yes.
and it will tell you where people are moving to. And he said basically a U-Haul from California to Texas, super expensive. From Texas to California, it's basically free.
Yeah, because those are all empty halls, right? Unless they can get someone to fill it up and pay to get it over there. So yeah.
It makes sense. All right. We're still at 11:59. So do you have good plans for Mother's Day weekend here? Are you all set?
Tomorrow is the Scottish the Highland Games.
Oh yeah.
Around the country, there's Highland Games, but here in Texas is the largest one in the United States, and so
Okay.
we like to attend that once a year. And I do have some Scottish heritage. My wife likes to remind me of my McDonald's side of the family, and although I don't wear a kilt out there yet, she sure is voting for me to get a kilt on. So,
Well, my sister married a Scottish fellow, and I wore a kilt for his wedding. So I have two kilts now in the wardrobe, but a fancy one and then another utila kilt. I haven't quite figured out the proper place to wear the utila kilt yet. But those Highland Games are cool. That's like where they flip the big log and stuff, right?
Yeah. They call them heavy athletics.
I can only imagine. That's interesting. All right, so let's get this off. Welcome everybody. It is Friday, which means it's time for the SmartMarket call. And today, talking about the market definitely slowed up a bit for everyone. I think there was some digestion period this week. We saw a lot of offers on the platform, not as many bids. We did move some Brazilian plywood this week, which I think it's a testament to kind of the conversation we're going to have here today about supply chain, in that our world is definitely global, and it's important to expand your horizon and make sure that you have all aspects of the supply chain covered as far as opportunities go, because you never know if you're saying, oh, I'm not going to use Brazilian plywood just because you don't know enough about it, that shuts the door on a potential opportunity for you. So that's my 2 cents. But without further ado, I'm welcoming Ken Pinto onto the show today. Welcome, Ken.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be associated with your group. I think you guys are doing a great job.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much. So, Ken, how do you find yourself on our show? What brings you? How did you get into this whole industry? You've got a pretty storied past. I think, people understanding where you come from will help them appreciate the message you're bringing today.
Yeah, sure. That does help with the context. I grew up with a tool belt around my waist, so I started working on job sites when I was 11. By the time I was 12 years old, I was a full-time employed carpenter downtown San Francisco. I worked on that job site for 4 years.
How old were you, did you say?
Between the ages of 12 and 16.
You were a full-time carpenter at the age of 12?
Yeah, so I would work immediately after school, drive right down to the job site and be there until the early evenings. I work on weekends, every school break. I quit school a couple times, got in trouble. I liked working more than I liked going to school. And so I struggled with that from time to time. My last 2 years of high school.
Your parents were okay with this whole idea of you swinging a hammer at age 12?
Very supportive of it. Yeah, my dad was a steel worker, and so blue collar for sure. And
cool.
And I got into it because their friends, my parents' friends, was putting an addition on his house about the same size as his house, so doubling the size of his house, and it was just him. It says, "Hey, would you like to go help Mr. Price put an addition on his house?" And I said the same thing any 11-year-old boy says. I don't know, right? And then that summer, I found out very quickly that I have a knack for the trade. So I learned kinesthetically. So if I can touch it, I remember it. And so I became very good with tools and measuring and cutting and installing. And by the time the summer was over, he goes, "You're as good as some of the carpenters I have working for me. You want a job?" I was like, "Yeah." And so I loved it. And so that job site was near Moscone Center in San Francisco. For 4 years. It was a good part of my formative years of my life. Last 2 years of high school, I built 5 houses. After high school, I joined the Navy Seabees and did construction for the Navy in Spain, Cuba, Guam, Japan 3 different times, and several military bases in Southern California. I'm a carpenter, mason, plumber, electrician, steelworker. Dad was a steelworker. Heavy equipment operator, most pieces, and a pretty good surveyor. So it made me, so after 14 years of being in the military and doing military construction, which is commercial construction, I decided to go into high volume production home building because the home building business is a warm business, whereas commercial construction can be a little bit cold. And so I jumped right in and then began to continually improve my construction operations. Quickly found myself in charge of construction, and then one day I realized that material management or lack of good material management was preventing me from continuing to excel. In a normal continual improvement process, you improve, then you plateau, then you improve, then you plateau, and you improve, then you plateau. And that's the normal cycle of continual improvement. But I had hit a plateau that I just couldn't get past. It was a ceiling I couldn't push forward, and discovered that it was materials that was really holding up my business. So I thought, okay, I'm going to get out of construction operations. I'm going to go into supply chain management. I'll fix that, and then I'll go back into construction operations. Well, I greatly underestimated the size of that project.
Right.
So.
Right.
And so, 11 years later, after 19 years of being in the home building business, working for 4 of the top 10 home building companies, I decided we really need the bar to raise for the entire industry. And so I wrote a book, How Much is the Milk, which is a supply chain management book for residential construction, and in hopes of helping the entire industry to find something. And so far, everyone tells me they at least find something in there that helps them to improve their operations. And so there's a little something for everybody, manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, dealers, subcontractors, and builders alike, small, medium, and large size builders. So I think
So
you know,
let's talk about the name of this book, though.
ah,
I go, how much is the milk, and why the heck does that matter to construction? So when you told me yesterday, then it makes sense. So why the name?
So when I first went into residential construction, I was in charge of a job site, and there was some damage inside one of my houses, drywall damage inside one of my houses. I don't know who did it. Nobody fessed up to it, so I got to pay for it. And so I want to write the change order to the drywall guy for the fair price. And so I opened the contract folder to look at his contract, and I can't figure. I'm looking for unit pricing, and all I see is this one big lump sum number. I thought, well, that must be what they send out to my construction trailer in the office. They probably have all the unit pricing. So I'll call them.
Okay.
So I call the purchasing manager and I say, hey, I can't find unit pricing. I'm in a predicament here. I need to write a change order. And all I can find is this lump sum number. He goes, oh, we don't use unit pricing. We just use lump sum numbers. And we use the competitive bid process to make sure we get the right price for contracts. And then we write change orders based on whether they look reasonable or not. Now, I'm not sure what reasonable means. To this day, I still don't understand what reasonable means, or nor how to roll that out equally amongst all your superintendents in a company. But that was what it is. So I wrote a change order and went on my way. And I likened that process to going into a grocery store. You have your grocery list. You get your shopping cart, and you're going through the aisles, picking up all your products. But in this store, there are no prices on any of the products or on any of the shelves. But you need your groceries, so you fill up your cart, you head to the register. She rings you up and she says, okay, that'll be $236.14. Being curious, she says, hey, I'm just curious, how much is the milk? And she, in a very practiced way, says, it is not our policy to reveal unit pricing. We think that, because of our selection and our service, we'll keep you coming back week after week. And if you were to compare your week's groceries cost here with another place, that you'll find that we're competitive. Not really sure what she just said. You ask again, hey, I just want to know how much the milk is. And she doesn't respond. So now nobody would ever shop at that store, right? So there's no one. There's not a single person who would shop at that store. But in home building, we do that every day.
Of course.
We write turnkey lump sum contracts, and we're not really sure how much the milk is. And for every single supply chain strategy that I have in my book, which is everything that's in my mind. I mean, I dumped everything into this book. Every single one of them depends on the builder understanding their SKUs. They need to know how many gallons of milk they use and how much the milk is.
Well, it's funny, when I first got into construction right out of college, I worked for a company in Portland, Oregon, who was doing work on Intel sites. And the one estimator or the project manager said, the first bid you put in, it doesn't matter what it is. You just have to get the contract, because after that, you make all your money on the change orders.
On the change orders,
And
yeah.
he had been on a site for 3 years on a 6-month project, because they get in and then it just change order, and they keep rolling it. And that's where they made all their money. So let's just kind of flip to, our first big question is, how did we get to where we're at right now in supply chain? Like the whole supply chain scenario, if you would, because you're a proponent of just in time, but let's just kind of, let's level set here and say, how did we get to where we're at?
The pandemic has created a lot of opportunities, and I call them opportunities because I think a lot of the challenges we had before the pandemic began still exist today. And so I think that the pandemic has highlighted supply chain challenges that we've been ignoring for a really long time.
Correct. Yep.
And so, and so for that reason, I'm actually glad for the crisis. I mean, I hate for us to have trouble building houses. I know there's a lot of families out there that need homes and can't find one, and that wrenches my heart a bit. I also hate that affordability is really wiping out the people at the lower end of the income level, which kind of kills me too. But I think that there's an opportunity for us to recognize that supply chain management is an opportunity for us to improve construction operations. And if we can take this chance to identify what they are, instead of, a lot of people are asking me, and it's the wrong question. They're saying, so how long is this going to last? Meaning that they're thinking, well, we'd really like things to go back the way they were. They weren't very good to begin with, so I don't want them to go back the way they were.
Right.
So I'm hoping that this is a catalyst for change that stays. And so what I'm telling people is, don't look for things to go back the way they were. Think about how you can make things better. And so, we still, and I know that we still have issues with production in China and container ships coming to the ports in LA, and their ports are still backed up. Not as bad as they were, but they're still backed up, and on and on and on. I know that we still have those issues, but in our own backyard, we have a lot of issues we could be working on as well. And so we could be much more efficient than we are today. And so that's and yes, you're right. I have been touting just in time for decades, more than 20 years. And because I think we were capable of it at those times. We're not now. So today, my recommendations to builders is not just in time. It is purchase in advance of need, because there is no longer a buffer of inventory in the supply chain. Everything that is being manufactured is being sold. Boom, 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 boom. And so inventory levels of materials have gone down so low that just in time just isn't quite possible anymore. So here we are. We're a couple of years into this pandemic. There's still folks thinking that, okay, we'll just wait for it to go by. Oh, come on now, it's been 2 years. Things aren't going to get switch overnight. And I think that
well, I think what's important, though, you say get better. Better to them means go back to the way it was, because they probably don't want to change their processes.
That's a good point. It's change is not easy. There's always a challenge to change, and
change is a big 4-letter word.
It is. I like to tell the story of the Max Planck Institute of Cybernetics. They did a study. You've always heard that people walk in circles when they get lost, and until 2009, there's never been any empirical data to determine whether that was actually true or not. Well, they did a study. I have no idea who funded it, but they did a study. They took people out into a thick forest and gave them one instruction: walk straight. Don't veer. Walk straight for as long as you possibly can. And they have GPS trackers on, so they could see where they walked. And so how do you think they did, Mike?
I'm guessing they walked in circles.
Yeah, they did. We do. We walk in circles. And so a lot of study was done on that. Is it because we have one leg longer than the other? Is it because, the wind blows even a little bit to one side? Is it because of terrain? And it's none of those things. Turns out it is psychological. So the further we walk away from what we know, the more uncertain we are about what lies ahead of us.
Of course, right.
And we have a natural tendency to circle back to where we were, even if it's not where we want to be. So yeah, change is hard, and even though we don't like the way things are, because we've been doing them for a long time, they're comfortable, and we have tendency to just circle back to right where they were. And so I hope that we don't do that in our industry. I hope we take this opportunity to make some great changes to turn transactions into interactions in our supply chain relationships, and collaborate a little bit more with our upstream supply chain so that we can work together to lower each other's costs. Not taking margins out of the supply chain, taking cost out of the supply chain.
So what's the big areas, or what are we doing wrong today? Like with given all the constraints of the current market, what things are we doing a poor job at?
I've spoken several times in the past month, and the one thing I hear over and over again from dealers and subcontractors alike is that about 25% of their trips to the job site are wasted because the job wasn't ready. Now that's equals about 8 deliveries per house at 1.2 million houses. That's what, 9.6 million deliveries. We need that capacity really, really bad. We're wasting a lot of time. It's a lot of our efforts and are being wasted, and it's capacity we need, it's truck drivers we need, it's trucks we need, and we just can't afford all these dry runs. And 25% is a pretty large number, and I heard it pretty consistently from a lot of dealers. So I don't like hearing that. I think that that's a process problem that we should be working on. We desperately need that capacity, and nobody wants to make a dry run to the job site. I mean, it just doesn't benefit anybody.
Right.
So
That's silly.
yeah, we shouldn't be doing that. I mean, gosh, what are we at, 5.50 a gallon for diesel? So goodness, that's killing us.
So like, what else? Like, well, how do we prevent that? Like, what are ways that we can go about preventing a dry run?
So I think construction superintendents who use software to run their job sites, which is pretty common. I mean, we don't see guys using Excel spreadsheets to run job sites much anymore. I mean, there still are, but the technology in our industry has gotten better and better, and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so it's pretty easy to have at least a decent database to run your business on. And so electronic schedules are great. And what I'm hearing from the dealers and subcontractors is that the superintendents aren't keeping them up to date. So they're changing so fast that the guys don't even want to deal with it. They're tired of continuously updating. And so the data is no good.
It's funny you say that. We're working on some process changes here, and it's more work up front, but that work up front is going to prevent more work later, right? So what ends up happening though is you start doing that, and the work up front prevents the work later, and you're like, I'm just wasting my time doing this because we don't need to do it. Nothing bad happened. But what doesn't get realized is it's because you did that work up front that you don't have to do the work later. And
yeah,
it's crazy. It's as simple as just changing the status of an order, or changing the status of something so it shows up on a report properly.
Yeah, I think that, part of the challenge is that they don't understand the ripple effect. So, think of a superintendent who's running a job site, and darn it, the guy didn't show up, and so now I got to reschedule everybody, in front of him. And I think that they either don't understand or don't think about the upstream ripple effect to the entire supply chain, to subcontractors, to dealers, to distributors, to manufacturers or mills. I mean, it goes all the way up the supply chain where that ripple effect is felt, and which creates more inefficiency because they're trying to create practices based on data that they have. If the data they have is not good, then it's going to be even more difficult to provide to make products available and to keep costs down for the builder who's using them.
Digitization is a wonderful thing, but it can only truly be maximized, the potential of it, when the whole chain is digitized.
Yes, I agree.
If I'm digital here and connected and all my data looks great, and you're over there in the same scenario, but someone in between us becomes that blocking point.
That's great.
In supply, this is the craziest thing in the supply chain. When we have a truck that's going to go into a lumber dealer, for instance, the dealer asks us to put their purchase order number on the bill of lading. Okay. Sure. You know how easy it is when the truck comes in and the truck driver goes, here, this is your PO 123. Great. Got it. Unload the truck. Let's go. We're using some digital brokers, like Uber Freight, for instance. And when we fill out all the information for the truck, we put in their PO. Does that PO make it from Uber to the truck dispatcher to the truck? No, it just doesn't make it there.
Yeah.
And then the truck gets there, and all of a sudden the truck driver has to sit for 2 hours while we're waiting, while we're scrambling to get that information to him.
Yeah.
The dealer has a digital system. We have a digital system. The broker actually has a digital system. The truck doesn't.
That's right.
We just got to close that little That'll gap. So, what we've done here, and this is actually going to come into the next question we're going to talk about. We've gone the next step, and we are making sure that whoever the shipper, wherever they load at, we tell that person, whatever document you give that trucker, make sure this number's on there. We don't have the relationship with them. We're not paying that. In many cases, it's the reload or the warehouse. But if we do the extra step and go there and say, put this on the bill of lading, it makes all the difference. I'm going through some stuff right now, and I have two documents right here that I was working on. One has the shipper or the customer's PO, one doesn't.
Hmm.
This took me about 3 seconds to rectify. This one I'm still not done with.
Yeah.
So it comes back to what we talked about yesterday in preparing for the call. How do you make yourself be a better customer?
So I think that's the key. Materials are out there. Builders are complaining to me all the time that they're not getting enough of them. I said, well, someone's getting them. And if you want to be the builder that gets them, you need to become the preferred customer.
Yep.
And preferred customer means different things to different people. And so one by one with each of your suppliers, you need to sit down and talk about, hey, what is it? And this is the best question I ever asked in my life. I said, what is it we do that costs you money? And there are things that I can do, things that I can change that will help reduce your operational costs. Oh my gosh, suppliers love hearing that question. They love it. They're like, oh yeah, I'm telling you, I got an earful. And so, in things that everyone thinks about, like fast pay, jobs ready, no wasted trips, pleasant to deal with, great forecasts. I mean, those are simple things. But then there's be little nuances that are unique to your company and their company that when you sit down together, you can discover together with the intention of lowering each other's cost of operational costs.
Absolutely.
And so when you do that, you will become the preferred customer. And I have guys, I have best friends that are working for home building companies, and they're like, nah, it's just about money. Whoever pays the most money gets the products. And while suppliers love high-paying customers, that's not the only thing they're looking at. And so I think they're missing an opportunity to capitalize on things that are important to the suppliers who are trying to serve them.
It's good, clean business.
Indeed.
So Materials Exchange was born out of the digitization of the financial markets here in Chicago. And prior to the futures exchanges being digital, you traded on the floor. It was that open outcry yelling back and forth, right? On busy days, they had just about every day, there was a thing called an out trade, which means you and I made a trade, but it didn't match up. Something was wrong. And the next day we had to go back and settle it up.
Okay.
Because it goes through the system and it didn't match. Those out trades had the potential to be really expensive. And it became known if you traded with so-and-so, you were more likely to get an out trade. And
yes.
people would avoid those type of transactions. And it's the same in business. If I know I'm doing a transaction with you, but it looks really profitable, it's probably going to be messy. Well, maybe I can do 2 transactions that make less money in the same time that I would have to deal with this one messy one with you.
Yes.
And in the financial markets, when everything went digital, it just cleaned those up. When the entire supply chain is digital, it absolutely cleans up that mess. So going back to what I was talking about with the trucking, where that document or that number's not on there, what I'm looking for, and it's going to happen soon, is digital bill of lading. When the truck driver doesn't have to be responsible for that, where it just shows up in the cab of his truck on his his iPad or whatever he's using.
Yes.
And we're moving there. I mean, that's the key to this whole supply chain. The thing, though, is while that sounds very non-human because it's all digital, the reality is it's the relationship you have between the companies that allow you to get that connectivity and to keep the connectivity. So you're passing data. The worst thing humans do in the whole entire world is pass data around. We've proven it with the telephone game, right? You put 10 people in a circle, you can't get the same message passed around.
That's right. Yeah.
But what humans do really well is use their creativity to solve problems. So it's when we use a computer or a digital solution for a repetitive process, which in the supply chain, there's tons of them, it makes sense. And it frees up our time to work on more creative solutions.
That's perfect. And that's exactly what I've been teaching lately, is how to transform transactions into interactions. So automate those transactions that are mundane, that are, have to be done every day. Automate those things, bill of ladings, purchase, a purchase order, a request for quote, et cetera. Automate those things so that you can spend time interacting with your suppliers to learn more about each other's business. And let me talk one more thing about preferential treatment, because I learned something really interesting. And one of the things that a supplier told me that was an issue with I was buying turnkey through a subcontractor, and the subcontractor was buying from the dealer. And the dealer told me that he was not getting all the materials that I wanted, nor was he getting the best pricing, because he was rude. Had nothing to do with volume or the price he was paying, margins, rudeness. So I found out that rudeness plays a pretty high role in whether you become known as preferential treatment or not. So, as a builder, that's something I never would have tolerated. So, and it's kind of old school. You got to be the tough guy, and the tougher you are, the better deals you're going to get. And I found out that's not the case. That the more collaborative you are and work together as one team instead of two, that's when the best pricing, best availability happens.
I think it's interesting when you look at the Silicon Valley or the tech companies that have just blown up and become so successful. There's an underlying theme out there where everyone works together. I mean, they have open source software, and the whole idea is like, my advancement, I will share, and you can grab it and you can take it in another direction and advance. So, talking about that collaboration, look, we got a problem on our hands in the United States. We don't have enough houses, right? Yes. And quite frankly, I think we're building them the wrong way. Yeah. We need to come up with a better solution. I love looking at the CLT, coming on, and what blows me away about CLT is the lack of knowledge, actually, that people out there that are really building houses right now, they just don't know about it. And it all comes back to, let's work together, let's educate, let's collaborate, let's share. I think data is an extremely powerful tool, or I don't know what you call it, but it's so powerful to have. But data that you just hold inside and don't let anyone else see becomes somewhat useless.
It is somewhat useless. I use the example of, I was at Pulte Homes when we were building 40,000 homes a year, and we used pretty much the same kitchen faucet on every house. It was the Moen 7560-C. I'm never going to forget that number. And although we had electronic schedules, I knew exactly in the next 30, 60, 90 days how many of those faucets I was going to need. You know what I told Moen? Nothing. I gave Moen a quarterly report of how many closings we had so they can give us a rebate. Completely squandering all that opportunity for demand planning they could have used if they had better data. So you're right. And the part of the challenge with the software systems that builders have today is they only push out to one level. So if I have a turnkey framer and he's buying the lumber, then my data goes to the framer and it doesn't go any further. And so what I'm working on with some other technology companies is how to move that information past the subcontractor to the dealer, distributor, mill, etc., so that everyone can see the same information at the same time and can make decisions on it. And so I think that that's an opportunity for us to grow. And data can be a powerful enabler if it's accurate and if it's disseminated timely.
It has to be accurate. There's no doubt about that. So, let's wrap up. What are the top 3 things? If I'm listening to this show today and I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense what you're saying. I want to make a change. What are the top 3 things that I should think about over the weekend that I could implement to improve my supply chain and how I experience that?
Well, chances are you don't know what you don't know. And so if you take the question, hey, what is it we do that costs you money? And you go to your suppliers one at a time. You can't do this in a big meeting. You do this one at a time, and it's better at their office rather than yours. And sit down and say, hey, what is it we do that costs you money, with intention of working together to lower each other's costs? That's going to have a ripple, and multiple effects. One is, the things I had to change in my company in order to lower their costs didn't cost me anything. There were process changes, there were notification changes. I changed fast pay. We had 30-day pay. I changed it to 10-day pay. Didn't cost us anything relatively. There were just process things. Didn't cost me anything, but made a big difference to my upstream supply chain. I didn't know. So I didn't know what I didn't know. So asking that question, and then when you do that, it's going to show you what you need to do in order to become preferential customer. When you're the preferred customer, you're going to get the materials you want, and your pricing is going to be probably a little bit better than the guy next to you who has a rude front office staff who's not being very nice. And so that's really the key to making big improvements, is going out there and learn how to find out where to make the improvements. And then my book is loaded with supply chain methodologies. You can't take advantage of any of them until you know how much the milk is. You've got to understand your SKUs and your quantities and pricing before you can move on to any supply chain methodologies that are going to help you out.
So you got to communicate, collaborate, and be congenial. The 3 C's. You heard it here. And one last plug though for SKUs. I would love to see a standardized SKU across the building materials industry. But that's a bigger fight for another day. Ken, this was great. Let's finish up with the question we always finish with, which is, what does Ken Pinto see that no one else sees, that if you brought it up at a cocktail party, people would laugh and think you're a little crazy?
Of all the construction operations, from high rises to shopping malls to churches to houses, the production home building business has an opportunity that no other area of construction has, and that is predictable repetition. And I think that most people on the outside of our industry probably think we're really good at taking advantage of the predictable repetition of our industry, but we really don't. We keep going out to bid. Now, if you're building if you've been building houses for 10 years, you ought to know by now how much a sheet of drywall costs. So you don't need to go out to bid to find out how much you should pay for it. And so unit costing and contracting by unit pricing leads to another potential opportunity. And this is where you really know you've done a great job in collaboration, and that is with shared risk and shared reward. So today, your suppliers are out there trying to get as much money as they can for their products because get it while you can. Their fear of missing out. Oh my gosh, the builders are making money. I want to make money too, and so let's all grab as much as we can. And I think that it's us versus them, and it's not all us on one team. And so when you create contracts or relationships of shared risk and shared reward, so when builder margins are good, then your margins are good too. When builder margins go down, then yours go down too. And we like to think that the competitive bid process automatically does that, but there are fallacies with that process. So when you really get together with your guys and say, hey, how much money do you absolutely have to make in order to keep the doors open, which is often about 15%. Say, look, great. We get to the point where we start losing money on houses. We don't want you to lose money because we need you to stay in business. But we'll just drop your margins down to 15. Now, when our margins go up to this, then yours go up to this. When ours go up to this, yours go up to this. And there's that escalation, which requires transparency on both sides. And when you get to that point, I think that's when you can change your terminology from subcontractor to trade partner. And that's when, you really got a good thing going with your suppliers. That's when you know that your collaboration is working. Shared risk, shared reward.
Transparency is what it really comes down to. This was great. I recommend anyone who is interested to pick up the book. How Much is the Milk? I'm gonna pick it up. I should have planned a little bit ahead of time and have read the book, but no, I definitely am going to read this. Thanks for coming on. I think, the world that we live in is constantly changing. The only thing that doesn't change is that we're always changing. And, it's going to be different in a year, in 2 years. So let's keep trying to get better. Ken, I appreciate the time today. And, we'll have you on again in a year or so, and we'll see if maybe you're back to just in time at that point.
Sounds good. Hey, Mike, if your folks will order that book on howmuchisthemilk.com, I'll go ahead and I'll sign all of them and put a little personal inscription in them for you.
Oh, that's fantastic. So I guess if you're going to order the book somehow, let Ken know you came through Materials Exchange's SmartMarket, and he'll sign it for you. Fantastic. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a safe week, and we'll catch you next week.
See y'all.